I'm not connected properly. I'll have to be back. Shoot.
What am I doing wrong here?
There, can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. Do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I thought that was on my end, and I just know nothing about what's going on here. So
No
I thought
problem.
that was a fair enough assumption and was just looking for buttons. How are you? How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, and it's great to have you here. I was just talking about my great concern with Donald Trump is not that he himself is going to be this particularly effective or competent leader. I don't think he's going to. I think he'll do damage, but more out of neglect, more out of an inability to handle the office of president. Um, he handled it the first time quite poorly. The second time, he now thinks he knows what he's doing, which makes a person even more dangerous. And
Absolutely.
and people don't realize that there's this thing called Dunning Kruger, where you first start something like you first start driving. And when you first start driving, you're terrified and you're nervous and you pay attention to everything. And that makes you a danger to everyone around you because they don't know when you're going to stop because you're just so nervous. But then you hit this point, on the curve where you think you figured out how to drive and you start driving like an utter maniac. And of course, that's when you're actually truly dangerous because now you're adding speed to the equation and false bravado and confidence. And I think that's where we're going to be in the second Trump administration. So, in that way, I think he's dangerous. What's your take, though? I mean, I don't know if you've been able to follow everything I've been blathering about, but
I've missed. Like I said, I was having some audio problems there, so I missed a considerable amount. Uh, what I did gather from what we're finally communicating here, I agree. Uh, I think he's probably as dangerous as we could fear he could be, but I think probably to our advantage, he is still a bumbling. You know, I don't like to use derogatory terms about his intelligence because he is not unintelligent.
right.
He is more dangerous for an obtuseness to knowledge. He knows it's out there, but unless it just makes sense to him and he's heard it before you, it sort
Mhm.
of doesn't exist. And I'm more afraid of what that has done writ large to society and all of our conversations and how we wrap our heads around where we're at and what just happened.
Mhm.
uh if I added my own 2 cents to what I see as far as his um effect, I think that a lot of what's happened thus far is the Steve Bannon flood the zone with
Yeah.
shit uh,
Right. Yep.
concept. And I think our society has not learned how to reconcile those kinds of informational distortions. Like uh, you see some of the jokes that come out of the Soviet Union, and there is a knowledge everybody's got that this is sort of how it works. And so
Yeah.
you don't talk about certain things, and when you do, you're very deft in how you handle it, but you're still recognizing it's there. Like the joke about please don't put out your cigarettes in the flower pots, you might damage the microphones. And we have not that kind of negotiated subtle communication for the era that we've come into. And so a lot of people are just running around armed with all these fragments and bits of, I heard this, I saw that, factoid type information. And while we all run around discussing it and arguing it out to its minutia, they're going ahead and doing the Monty right in front of us as it's happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's the bigger danger. All the stuff that has been said is as likely to happen as it isn't, because these people are somewhat maniacs, at
Yeah.
least the true believers. But I think how we go forward in that new environment of President Camacho, right? And
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
we're going to say whatever and, look to what we do rather than what we say. And in the meantime, good luck getting your own point of view out there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I think we're probably in a similar space on
Yeah.
on that. I missed the beginning though.
Yeah. I think for me, what I fear isn't so much the Trump administration itself. I think he's going to get 2 years where he's going to get to kind of run havoc and do things. And 2 years is not a lot of time bureaucratically. And at the
No,
end of 2 years, we'll get the midterms, and hopefully we can flip the House and or the Senate, probably the House, maybe not the Senate. I don't know, but we can flip something. And people will be so disgusted with this guy and, his show called The Aristocrats, if you know that joke, The
right,
Aristocrats, you know, um, that they turn against him and they seat a Democratic majority in either the House and or the Senate, which then will block and stonewall some of his worst impulses.
right.
But for me, the concern is that he's kind of killed the sacred cow. He's broke, I guess, the felon barrier to the
Yeah,
presidency. Not to mention a bunch of other barriers. Prior to whatever year it was, I think it was 47 or 49 when we broke the sound barrier. You couldn't break the sound barrier, and anybody who tried
right.
to do it died. And then Chuck Yeager does it, and then all of a sudden, a year later, everybody's breaking the sound barrier because we kind of figured it out. And I'm afraid that Trump likewise has figured out kind of how to break these barriers. And now he's in office, and it's going to become an instruction manual
Well, you've
for
seen all
future
these
people.
Nixon people that are like, what the hell did we, go to jail for or give up?
Yeah,
Because it should be legal, except that all of that is sort of wrapped up in whatever modern moment we're in. Obviously it's not a real, it is a real thing currently, but the past is not changing because of where we are today, as much as MAGA may like that to be the case.
mm,
And I think that's sort of it goes to your point there. We are still, as the other side of society, I wouldn't say half, because I think there's a lot more than half, but whatever is not the MAGA agenda is still here along for the ride. I
mm,
was told today to go home or to leave. I was given the goodbye if I was not joking about people not being happy to come to the U.S. right now.
right.
And a very sweet old lady who was a friend of someone we went to school with was like, "Oh, I hope you're joking, and if not, goodbye." And I
Yeah,
think, you know, good luck on Beyonce's internet getting rid of me, but maybe you've got, you text the department, Stephen Miller's department of, denunciations. I'm sure at some point it could happen. I think though that much of all of this panic, because there's real panic. I mean, I know,
mm, mm,
especially a lot of protected status type people are just really, really in a bad place right now.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I don't want to diminish any of what they're feeling, because it's a real fear. But
Yeah.
I think most of what they're being used for is more of, it's like chaff. They're just throwing it up into the air, and everybody's defenses are like, what the hell's going on? And they're trying to make moves that are really uh, questionable whether they're really even bad in the long run for the Republic. But the fact that the here and now, the people that are going to suffer through it are real people going to go through real stuff. It's a scary proposition, like any of these things coming to be, even at their most mild.
Yeah.
I'm reassured though when I hear the numbers. Um, you know, Operation Wetback, as disgusting as that was called, supposedly deported like 1.5 million or somewhere around there. And the actual numbers of people that really left the country were much lower, like 300,000 or something.
Yeah.
So what they're really able to pull off, I hope that our feeling that the incompetence will rule might be
Right.
our real saving grace here. I'm
Yeah.
hopeful.
Yeah. And I do think in a way we can bank on that. But I really think what's important right now is that people like yourself and myself, who are these straight white Caucasian males who have
Right,
nothing to lose if all we do is shut up and do our job, shut up
right.
and go to work, shut up and consume. Hey, life is great, right? But no, it's very important for us to stand up in solidarity with all of these other folks out there who are in fact in targeted groups, you know, and
I couldn't agree more.
you know, I
I've been spending a lot of time thinking about this. Uh, I've seen a lot of people in social media that are very quick to kind of go at each other on the crosstabs of these demographic breakdowns of the voting turnout. And it's
Mhm.
extremely upsetting to me as a white man, because you and I have way more in common with what's wrong with this country than
Right.
any of those sub-tab populations. And how we manage our own folks, as it were, is a real tough question right now,
Yeah.
because I think most of where we're having these problems, it breaks down along the concept of whiteness. I know you're pretty comfortable in that concept. Uh, I've had some good, deep and meaningful conversations with some folks that I just come across in life, working or buying things. I buy a lot of stuff online, and so I meet kind of the salt of the earth folks that just sort of show up with their truck and we talk. And I found that listening to them and trying to be empathetic and hear them out, it really gets me to a much deeper place in the conversation of like how we get along with each other, and what racism really is versus bigotry and all that good stuff. But as soon as I get to that point where the other guy starts feeling some kind of way, the wall goes up and it becomes extraordinarily difficult to be able to get past
Mhm.
that barrier. And I struggle with where we are able to create a sense of safety for other white people to just say, I just don't like being seen as the white guy or racist or what have you.
Mhm.
They don't lack the resources to explain it to themselves, just like we've been able to figure it out. They could as well.
Mhm.
But there is this sort of like I was saying with the Soviet system, some of the tools we have that are those subliminal communication strategies, is there is this clamming up that goes on as soon as we get there. So the fact that we were even able to have this conversation already puts us really at odds with so many of even the people that we like to talk to that are, friendly, cool people. But as soon as we have to start taking real accountability for where we are in that voting population, in that people who are out there doing the things in society that are upsetting the people that don't have the same opportunity to, have that privilege that we do. I want to find a way to work through that uh, boundary we've got, because I feel like it's a real key to so many of the other socioeconomic areas that I think we also tend to agree on more than some of our conservative friends.
Yeah.
I think it's hard for them to understand when we're communicating with them that we're really not trying to upset the economic apple cart the way that they feel that we are. And a lot of that gets lost in this resentment that comes from a place that's not really logical. It's like it's deep in our gut. And it's a thing that I know because I've had it. And uh I love all peoples. Here I am as a white guy going to say it, but I have all kinds of friends, and I have a brown wife whom I love, but I'm still a white man in her life experiencing things as like a white man does. And
Right.
I see a very distinct difference in how life comes at me versus how it comes at her.
Mhm.
And I think if we could level those areas of the playing field, the economic side would probably make more sense to a lot of us and not be such a prickly rabbit hole to go down where it should be a pretty straightforward thing.
Yeah, yeah. I think when other people, people of color, and others, women and other minority groups speak up, we need to shut up and listen. We need to
Yeah,
make space for them, absolutely, so we can hear what they actually have to say. But there are also a time and a place for us to use our whiteness to defend those people. It's not that we're a white
yeah,
savior thing. It's we're not here to save them, but we are here to speak up in solidarity and to communicate to other people like ourselves that it's okay to stand up for equity and justice. And for me, a big thing here that you've kind of hinted at here, you've mentioned it, is the economic side. One of the reasons I think the Democrats lost is because for the past probably 8 years or so, there's been a massive emphasis on identity politics. Now,
yeah,
identity matters, it's incredibly important. But we have held that up as the highest thing when for me, I think it should be economic justice, because I believe, and this is my twisted logic here, if we have economic justice, then everything else kind of falls into place underneath it. If you can go and get a job regardless of your identity, and you can get a fair wage regardless of your identity, and you have your own money, you can then have your own home, you can have your own business, you can do whatever it is you choose to do without anybody else's, leave, if you will.
right.
um, Whereas right now, I think we're focusing on, you have to accept this person as, the same as you, which is true. It shouldn't even have to be said.
Yes,
But there's this whole economic side of things. And until we have economic justice, until women and men are paid the same rate for the same work, until a person of color or a person who is trans or in a same sex relationship feels that they're economically secure, that they can go out and buy a home, that they can start a business, that they have
absolutely.
everything that you and I have as white men, we're not there yet. So I do think they're related. They do go hand in hand. The
Well,
identity politics is
I think the
important, but
two
for me, the
things
economic justice is number one for me.
the two things are uh,
Yeah, they're
not
together. They
something
go
that
together.
that
Yeah.
yes, and when I'm talking about the whiteness situation, I'm speaking specifically because we are two white men talking about this right now, and I'm agreeing that that is a positive thing. I've
Right.
seen a lot of black creators on say TikTok that are like, please, white men that have this sort of a viewpoint, we'd love to hear from you too. And our
Mhm.
tendency is to try and say, listen. so not a lot of podcasts are very good at just like sitting there listening. Uh, Maybe the fellow from Blues Clues can pull that off. I don't do it very well. I'm a terrible listener. I try, and I'm trying to get better, but I'm not a very good listener. But I agree with you on the whole about the economics issue. So I don't want to confuse those two things together. I'm saying that as a white person who is pretty much in spaces where there's always white people, I need to be able to communicate to them why they care about the economic uh, future of a black family or
Correct.
a an immigrant family that's maybe not the status that they prefer. And I think that's another place we've kind of I agree on the identity politics. Um, I don't want to say red herring, but it is sort of a red herring that the Democrats have come back to. You know, they gave up identity politics originally when the KKK was smashed, and they should have left it there. And with the flip, I blame Republicans for this. They created this dynamic with the Southern strategy, and I mean they did it all tongue in cheek. If you go back and you watch the strategies being talked about originally, and the replacing the N word with welfare queen, and making them drive big Cadillacs and stuff. So there was an intentional flipping of that put it into the Democrats' lap. My own personal feeling, if you go back and unwind some of it, and I know I'm kind of on a tangent here, but that's unfortunately how my mind works. Uh, if you go back to the civil rights movement, we give a lot of credit to um, the civil rights workers in the 60s and the late 50s that were on the ground doing that. But many folks leave out the 20 years preceding, 25, 30 years preceding that Thurgood Marshall was taking it through the courts, starting, if I'm
That
not
guy.
mistaken, at the same time Hitler was elected,
Yeah.
right? So you have a black man filing legal briefs
Yeah.
that take 30 years to percolate, and they finally got there, and we don't have that perspective, I
He's a
think.
soldier.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and that's sort of where we're at with all of these things, is they're a long game, but we have so little context for people to put perspective on their own place in history right now. My own um, my own background in manufacturing is a good example of it. I'm very familiar with where the labor movement uh, got us with our rights today because I've studied it.
Mm.
In that movement, the metalworking unions played a big role. And the reason that those were good jobs and are still considered good jobs is because of unions doing very hard work. And
Yeah.
now most of that awareness is gone. And the folks like me that I talk to all the time have no idea of what a tariff really means to their own
I
business. They're
know.
like, I make things here. And
Yeah.
I say,
Yeah.
so do I. Well, I buy American aluminum. You know what? So do I. Well, where do you think that comes from?
Yeah.
It turns out if you talk to these recyclers, uh, our aluminum in California goes straight across to China because we can't afford to melt it down here. So
Mm.
the idea that we're going to just take one thing and substitute it for the other, even though at its
Yeah.
core, I think you and I are probably more of a fan of tariffs than any kind of neoliberal is, but they have to mean something. And if we don't have uh, the ability to produce on our end what we are still needing as consumers, the price is not only going to go up, but there will just be a lack or a scarcity,
A shortage
and
of
that
it. Yeah.
will impact all kinds of other things as well. So it's a
Yeah.
very prickly, slippery slope, and all of these elements are not being contextualized to be able to really make a good decision about what helps you economically or hurts you economically these days.
Yeah. I do think that it's very likely that Trump will do a ham-fisted job with the economy in general. We've had a tremendous period of economic growth, inflation, and so on, is also as part of that. Wall Street's at all times highs. Bitcoin is like at 83,000 or whatever. Like everything is red hot and it's up there. The inflation has come down some, but at the end of the day, the same forces that drive the market up will also bring it down. It is cyclical. It's called the business cycle. And
Yeah.
what I think is going to happen is we're going to see just a natural erosion of the strength that we see in the market because it just can't continue. It's like a runner that can sprint, but the runner can't sprint forever. The runner has to slow down and take a break. And when that happens, I'm not so sure that the Trump White House is going to manage the situation effectively. I believe it will happen over the next 4 years. We've already had the longest bull run in history, so we're due for a bust. And so when that happens, and when he mishandles the situation, there will be one silver lining, which is that I think people will have a bad taste in their mouth when it comes to neoliberal, capitalist politics, whatever, and they will hopefully turn to the left. And my fervent prayer is that the Democrats, or if not them, someone who's actually on the left, because Democrats are not
Right.
leftists, by the way, somebody who's actually on the left will pick up a message of social justice and economic justice and carry that standard forward. And then I think they will win elections in landslides because, in general, people don't want to see the safety net that they've paid into all these years destroyed. They don't want
Right.
social services gutted. You know, they may have an issue with people who are taking advantage of these things. But the fact of the matter is, there are really no welfare queens out there. And anybody who's had any connection with the social safety net
Maybe
know that it's,
Elon.
yeah, you know that it's hard to get benefits. It's hard to keep benefits. The benefits are paltry at best.
Right.
You know, there's nobody out there who's driving a Cadillac and watching a big screen TV on all these benefits. And if they are, it's a contrivance or a fluke. But no. Um,
Most
and I,
most of these resentments that we carry around in society about that taker class, as I've heard
yeah,
it
yeah,
called, are pretty fallacious to begin with.
they're make believe.
My
They're
own mom
boogeymen.
worked in
Yeah,
social service for most of her adult life,
yeah,
and they I forget what the number is now because it's been 20 years or so, but they have one of the lowest incidences of fraud relative to other government programs.
yeah,
And my some of our other experience, my wife actually worked in Native American. Um, they work. It's a very strange place that they work in, but it was sort of in between a tribal government situation, but it was administering federal money. And you will find that in these kinds of programs, they just put the money where they see best, and you kind of have to go along with it. And if you don't care for that, administrations turn over and they just get new people. And a lot of the 501c3 universe, I think, has sort of spun out in a way like you've seen in the tech industry. I feel like a lot of the nonprofit world has lost its ability to help and is pretty much just all these programs out there treading water to keep administrators administrating.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think that that is probably a real thing that could be improved, but I don't see the Republicans actually doing that. And I think what you're saying is it's true enough to the point that I personally am almost asking for a Democratic loss in the House this time around. Not
yeah,
because of any sane reason, but just
yeah,
the
yeah,
feeling I have that the best thing right now is to just let them do their thing. It's the same
yeah,
argument that I think makes the filibuster sort of a silly thing, you know? If I could
Right.
go in there with my party and I put my propositions on the table and they do great, then everybody does great. But if they crash the economy, it'd be nice for everybody to be able to say, oh, gee, the Republicans did that, like, say, the Republican Great Depression, right? Which is now they've managed to cut that first part off of it. But I think that that's probably the best thing for us, as much as I hate saying that, again, because we're white men and we're
Yeah.
not going to suffer. And I think that's the hardest thing for a lot of us who voted the best we could
Yeah.
and still wound up in this conundrum, because uh, there's no other tools within government that we have. We really have to just be what we're doing right now, in community, outside, hopefully exerting pressure on whatever we wind up with as leadership.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I agree with you. While I do think from a pragmatic perspective on the left, giving the Republicans the wheel and letting them, crash straight into the iceberg is
Right.
absolutely going to be fantastic for us on the left. On the backside, now granted, there's going to be an epic mess that we're going to have to clean up. The problem, though, is that in crashing into the iceberg, people are going to suffer, and we don't want any of that.
Right.
Not worth it. But if it's going to happen, it's going to happen, and we'll be there to pick up pieces. But the important thing right now, and part of the reason why I'm doing this show, is we have to speak up, we have to recognize each other, we have to come together and organize, because we don't want those casualties. We know that we're headed for the icebergs, and we know that the odds of us wrecking into an iceberg are pretty good. And we know that in the long term, that good will come of this, because there are enough good people in the world that they will say never again, and they will crack down, and they will insist that at a minimum there be more lifeboats, and that we sail a different route in April, and so on. There will be changes and reforms from which we will all benefit. But as you know, as an engineer, regulations are written in blood, and we
Right.
don't want that blood, you know.
No.
So we don't want it. We
I
voted
I
against
think
it. We're
about
gonna,
the safety factor in my hamburgers,
yeah,
because I know somebody else appreciates a good hamburger, and I would hate for him to get E. coli when he's having one of those late night cravings, like I'm sure you're familiar with as well.
yeah,
And I
absolutely,
think those are the things that are going to end up being best left on the necks of the people who wanted it all this way. They can drink their raw milk and have E. coli in their food and all that good stuff. But for some of us, we're going to have to, just be careful in the meantime.
yeah. Well, the important thing here, and I'm about to wrap up the show, but I think the important thing here is we need to stand up and show some courage in the face of all of the opposition and all the mean tweets and everything that's out there. I do think it's premature to freak out and run for the hills, or to say I'm moving to Canada or New Zealand. Okay, but I think it's premature.
If they'd
Um,
have us.
there is there's trouble coming, but again, if we band together and look after each other, if we protect us, I think we can get through this together. And let's just pray that in 2 years the midterms come, and we can put up a stone wall and endear this guy from the rest of the world, or the rest of us to some degree. And then in 4 years we fix this thing, we turn the ship around, and hopefully it hasn't sank, but we'll see. We'll see.
I hope for the best, expect the worst.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely have to prepare. Well, folks, I want to thank you all for checking out the show. If this is your first time watching it, well, of course, it's your first time watching. It's my first time doing it. I want to invite you to come back next Monday and check out the show. I'll post a link. Anybody who wants to chime in and join, just like Josh did, or maybe you want to come on, Josh, I'll figure out how to do it, and I'll put a link in on my Facebook page and elsewhere. I am going to start putting this up on YouTube, but it takes a while for YouTube to verify my account and let me post to it. But we will get a YouTube channel going, and I want to invite all of you folks then to check us out on there and draw what inspiration you can. And again, bring your loaves and fishes to the table too. Contribute just as Josh did today. because we find that when you do that, these things get multiplied and many more people are helped and benefited from your sharing of your point of view, your thoughts, your ideas, and so on. As long as you're doing it with love, you can't go wrong. You can't misspeak. Just speak the truth and do it from a point of love, and you're golden. So
Here,
there you
here.
have it. There you go.
I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, Josh. Thank you for coming on. And to the rest of you, thank you for watching. And we will see you in a week. Hang in there and take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.